Good afternoon. We're back with more Marvel Champions, and today will be a card review of the Gamora Hero Pack. In my review of Star-Lord, I liked him a lot at first look. After playing him, I found him a little bit weaker than I expected or hoped for. So far, the Guardians have been underwhelming. Rocket Raccoon, decent damage dealer. Groot, underwhelming. Star-Lord, little worse than I hoped for, but still very interesting, fun to play, very swingy, sometimes frustrating. And we'll see about Gamora. We'll take a look. Her alter ego has 3 recovery, the standard 6 hand size, and 10 hit points. You may include up to 6 attack and or thwart events in your deck from aspects other than your chosen aspect. Well, that's great. I love deck building flexibility. It opens up possibilities for deck building combinations that elevate the hero. It opens up versatility for designing decks to overcome specific challenges. Action: look at the top card of your deck. If that card is an attack or thwart event, draw it once per round. Well, that's occasionally going to draw you a card, occasionally just allow you to scry for the purposes of like Cosmo. But we don't use alter ego abilities too much in solo because switching to alter ego is typically an emergency mode thing to do, and that's because when the villain thwarts and you're solo, there aren't very efficient ways to deal with the large amount of threat that you then need to deal with. So we don't give a lot of weight to alter ego abilities, either upside or downside. Well, there's never downside, but we don't really care too much how strong the alter ego abilities are. We do care if a champion or a hero is very focused on their alter ego, like for example Miss Marvel, because that's a problem in solo. Gamora's hero is 2/2/2 stats. Finesse: after you play an attack event, remove 1 threat from a scheme once per phase. After you play a thwart event, deal 1 damage to an enemy once per phase. That seems good. This will tend to favor lower cost events so that you can take advantage of this each turn with both an attack and a thwart threat. Nebula: 2 cost, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 health. After Nebula enters play, search your deck for an attack or thwart and add it to your hand. That's a great ally. That's above average for a hero-specific ally. I would say this is an exceptional level ally. A cut above what we usually see from hero-specific allies. A card draw, you get 2 attack, and then you get a jump block for 2 cost. That's great. That would still be decent if she costed 3. Acrobatic move, 0 cost. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. That's good. We just said, looking at Gamora's hero card, that she's favoring low cost attack and thwart events so that she can take advantage of her responsibility for each action, for attacking and thwarting each phase, hopefully. And so a 0 cost 2 damage card. You lose the card, so you're essentially spending 1 card and you get 2 damage. That's fine. It's adequate, nothing exceptional, but it's fine and it synergizes with what she's trying to do. Cross counter, 1 cost. When you would take any amount of damage, prevent 3 of that damage, deal 1 damage to an enemy, remove 1 threat from a scheme. This is a hero interrupt, an attack, defense, thwart event. Does that mean it procs both her attack and thwart responses during the opponent's phase? I believe it does. Now, interestingly, there's a ruling that because this is an attack and thwart doesn't mean you can simultaneously remove a stun and a confused. You have to choose one or the other. But this is going to make both of her response abilities go off. You get 3 damage prevention, 1 damage, and 1 threat for 1 cost plus the card. It's good. It's very good. In fact, this is an exceptional card. One of the best events of this type, damage prevention, attack, or may be the best event of its type in the game. Now, I don't mean events that simultaneously do 3 things, because I don't think we've seen anything like that before, but I mean events that prevent damage or do damage or remove threat. This is the best event, the best attack, thwart defense, or defense event in the game, in my opinion, in terms of its efficiency. That was a confusing statement. But what I mean by that is that you're getting essentially 5 in value plus Gamora's 2 responses for 1 cost plus the card, and that is very, very strong efficiency. That is a much better way to say that. So far, a very strong ally, a decent damage card, and then cross counter is exceptional. So Gamora's looking pretty good. Set the pace, remove 1 threat from a scheme. We'd like it to be 2. Threat removal always seems to be less efficient than damage by design, which keeps the difficulty high, because the primary difficulty comes from inefficient healing and inefficient threat removal. So this is meh. This is below average, I would say, and may actually, if it wasn't for Gamora's response, this would get thrown away for sure to spend as a resource, and that may still happen even with Gamora's response, because this doesn't do a lot for losing a card, and we may want to use this to pay for things that do more. Decisive Blow, deal 4 damage to an enemy, 3 instead, or 7 instead if you have played a thwart event this turn. Okay, so the card I just said wasn't very good does at least help you combo with Decisive Blow to deal more damage. 2 cost plus the card for 7 damage is good. Above average. Nothing exceptional, but it is above average. Forward Momentum, 2 cost, remove 3 threat, 5 instead if you've played an attack event this turn. Once again, we see that threat removal is less efficient than damage. This is below average. Probably only going to be used in an emergency situation, especially if we haven't played an attack this turn. Conditioning Room, 1 cost support. Exhaust Conditioning Room, return the bottommost attack or thwart event from your discard pile to your hand. Heal 1 damage from Gamora. Every hero has one of these support or upgrades that only work in Alter Ego, it seems, and they almost never get played in solo, because typically we only get 1 use out of them per game, and that doesn't usually make them very good, and so we throw them away for resources usually, or as the discard card in Spiritual Meditation or something like that. And this one is no exception. It's fine if you have the opportunity to use it once or twice. It'll be better in multiplayer than it is in solo, but in solo these supports and upgrades tend not to be very good. Keen Instincts. Exhaust Keen Instincts, generate a wild resource for an attack or thwart event for 1 cost. That's great. Only need to use it a few times to make it good. Does she get more than 1 of them? She does, okay. She's shaping up to be an above average hero, based on her reasonably efficient damage abilities and her counter card, Cross Counter, which is the best card in her set. Gamora's Sword, 3 cost upgrade. After you play an attack event, deal 1 damage to an enemy. You have to play a lot of those to make this worth it at 3 cost. That's expensive. I don't know where we'd find a turn to play this, because usually in solo, when we're playing on expert or heroic, we need to get value immediately for the resources that we spend, because we're always in panic mode. And I don't know where we'd find a turn where we can spend 3 for an upgrade and then not really get anything for it until future rounds, maybe get 1 damage right away. So this will be hard to find time to pay for. But this hero is going to live or die by her deck building, flexibility, and by cross counter, which is the best card in the set. Her resource generation is decent, but she's going to live or die by her deck building. She's above average. I think she's the best of the Guardians that we've seen so far. Probably in the range of Black Widow, maybe a little worse. She doesn't have any CC, no stuns or confuses. She doesn't have any way to ready herself. But passive damage is good because it allows you to deal damage even when you are exhausted, which happens a lot in solo, because with multiple cards and playing in expert mode, you get the expert mode card which exhausts you. You get her obligation. That happens in any difficulty. Then you also get emergency defenses, because sometimes you get attacked 2 or 3 times by the boss. And so you need ways to still do damage when you're exhausted, and she has that with her response, and she can also remove threats. So I think that's a strong ability. I think she really favors low cost events in her deck design, and there are some decent ones available in Justice right now. And are there in Aggression? I'm not sure, I'll have to check, but I know there's a couple in Justice that I would like to run in this deck. Possibly in Protection, we'll have to look. She doesn't really do anything with defense events. So let's take a look at her aspect cards, the aspect cards that come in her hero pack. We have Angela, 0 cost ally with 0 thwart and 2 attack. After Angela enters play under your control, search the top 10 cards of the encounter deck for a minion and put it into play engaged with you. Shuffle the encounter deck if a minion was not put into play. This way, shuffle the encounter deck, and then if a minion was not put into play this way, discard Angela. So she's, let's see, you get 2, 4, 8 value for 1 resource. Probably you'll have to use one of her attacks to deal with the minion that you put into play. If you can deal with a minion with just 1 attack, i.e. you can find a 2 health minion in the top 10 cards of the encounter deck, then this is a phenomenal ally. In scenarios where you cannot, because they don't exist, because the scenario is harder, she's not that good. It'll be like, if you could find a minion that you could deal with just Angela and your hero's basic power, so a 3 or a 4 attack minion, health minion, depending on what hero you're playing, then she's still pretty good, I would say. She's still pretty good even in that scenario for 0 cost. Now, if you're playing against like Ronin and all the minions are 6 or 7 health, then she's actively bad. So this is a card that you don't include in every scenario. It's very scenario specific. And she has the potential against weaker scenarios to be extremely strong, and against really strong scenarios to be quite weak. We saw that with Star-Lord as well. He kind of scales up as the scenarios, as the encounter decks get harder, or he scales down as the encounter decks get harder, and he scales up as the encounter decks get weaker. And here we see this with Angela as well. It's perhaps a design philosophy for the Guardians cycle. It's interesting. Clobber, 2 cost. deal 3 damage to an enemy. If this is the first card you have played this round, return this card to your hand. We've seen this before, or something just like it. I'm not a fan of mediocre cards that you can play over and over, because each time you're only getting mediocre value for your resources. Why would you want mediocre value for your resources repeatedly, unless you have some kind of combo that makes it more than mediocre? I don't think that's the case here. Even with Gamora, this is not a good card and not an efficient card, so don't really like playing inefficient cards over and over. Plan of attack, a 0-cost tactic. Search the top 4 cards of your deck, top 7 if you're in alter ego form, for an attack event and add that to your hand. Shuffle your deck. This is just a deck thinner, and deck thinners are fine. They cycle. Spiritual Meditation is an example of one. So I would play this in an aggression deck that's running enough attack events to reliably draw one. Now, if you play this and you don't find an attack event, then it's actively bad. You've just spent a card and gotten nothing. You've essentially shrunk your hand size. So this will really depend on your deck design. If you can't reliably find a attack card in the top 4 cards of your deck, I'd say you need to find it like, I don't know, 90% or more of the time to make this good. Then it's good. And if you can't do that, then it's pretty bad, and I wouldn't run it. Uppercut we've seen before. First hit, 1-cost event. Attack, deal 2 damage to the villain or a hero interrupt. When a minion initiates an attack, deal 2 damage to that minion. It's 1 cost plus the card for 2 damage. That's not very good. When a minion initiates an attack, I don't think that really adds value to it. I suppose it means you can play it after you drew it, but it's very inefficient. You pay heavily for that flexibility by sacrificing basically 2 damage, because typically a card like this would deal 4. So not very strong. Impede, remove 3 threat from the main scheme. If this is the first card you played this round, return this card to your hand. The criticism that we applied with the attack version of this applies again. It's mediocre, and I don't really like playing mediocre cards over and over. The ability to play it over and over doesn't make up for its mediocre efficiency. Combat training. I think these are intended to give Gamora like a guaranteed card to play every round. Nah, I don't really. Even with her +1 to this card, it's still inefficient. So it's so weak that that even Gamora doesn't make up for it. Combat training we've seen before. Godslayer, 3-cost upgrade, restricted. When your hero makes a basic attack against a unique enemy, exhaust Godslayer, your hero gets +2 attack for that attack. So a unique enemy, that would also mean a villain, right? So if you attack a villain or a unique minion, you get +2 attack. You need to take advantage of that about 4 times to be good. It's better than Gamora's hero card. Gamora's sword, I think. I think this is better than that. I'm surprised that they weren't reversed with the Gamora's sword. This card being called Gamora's sword and being given to Gamora, and the other card being called Godslayer and being given the +1 attack per event, because I think this one is better. Assuming that it does indeed apply to villains, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, because they are unique. I like this. I'll include it in Gamora's deck. It is expensive and takes a while to get off the ground, so mid to late game it probably doesn't get played, but if you can get it out early, you can get a lot of value out of it. Now, you do have to use your basic attack a lot, and your basic attack just isn't available a lot in expert or heroic modes. So this does get worse in the higher difficulties. because of the expert card that exhausts your identity. And it gets worse in solo because more often in solo you have to use your hero to defend an attack. At least it feels like that happens more often in solo than in multiplayer. So now that I think about it more, maybe I don't run it. It probably looks better than it is. Just because of that caveat of needing to make a basic attack to take advantage of it. And so often your basic action isn't available for your hero in solo. I don't know why this is miniature. Drax. 3 costs. Play only if your identity has the Guardian trait. Drax cannot attack minions. And he's 3 cost for 3 attack with 4 health. This is a great ally. Another phenomenal Guardians ally. All of them have been really, really strong. And I would definitely include all of them whenever I'm running a Guardian hero. He's one of the strongest allies in the game. Along with Rocket. Groot is probably the weakest of them, which is okay. I guess they don't like Groot because his hero is the weakest of the Guardians as well. But yeah, Drax is a must include for a Guardians deck. Any deck with where the hero has the Guardian trait. Hit and run. Three-cost event. It's both attack and thwart. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. Remove 2 threat from a scheme. It's good that it procs both of Gamora's abilities. It's still not efficient enough to run, though. Only 4 value for 3 is really weak. And Gamora's abilities don't make up for that. So I wouldn't run this in the Gamora deck. I would run more efficient 1 or 2 cost attack or thwart events. Pivotal moment, 2 cost event. Deal 2 damage to the villain, 5 instead if there is no threat on the main scheme. This is not quite efficient enough to want to run it with like 6 damage. But given that it's coming out of the Justice side scheme, this isn't bad. It's close to good. Probably not worth the card slot though, without at least 1 more damage. It's probably meant to be used with Gamora, that's why it's a little bit undercosted. Or a little bit underpowered. Because they're accounting for the 1 threat from Gamora as well. But even in Gamora, I think there's other cards we'll want to run. Comms Implant, okay. 1 cost upgrade attached to a Guardian ally. 1 per ally. Attached ally gets +1 thwart and +1 hit point. Well, we don't really like upgrades on allies in solo because we're not running, especially if you're running leadership, you don't have a way to heal your allies, keep them on the board. So you don't get enough value out of attachments before the ally has to tank a boss attack, which is one of, if not the primary usage of allies in solo play, is having them tank boss attacks. True Grit, 1 cost event. It's a thwart. After your hero defends against an enemy attack, remove threat from a scheme equal to your hero's thwart. It'll cost you 1 card and you lose the card from your hand, so 2 cards and you only get to thwart for 2. That's not very good efficiency, so yeah, it's threat removal in the protection scheme, but you pay a price for that, and that price is that you don't get a lot of value for your cost, so I would not run this. Enhanced reflexes we've seen, and that is it. Well, overall, I expect Gamora to be roughly equivalent to Star-Lord. She's lacking in crowd control, which means that when we don't have our defensive ability cross-counter her, she's just going to take damage until she's forced to switch to alter ego mode to heal. So I don't think she's S tier. I don't really think she's A tier either. Like the level of Scarlet Witch, she's maybe at the level of Black Widow, but about the B plus tier roughly, with Star-Lord, Black Widow, Iron Man. They're all in that kind of ballpark. Scarlet Witch above that, and then Doctor Strange, Captain America, Ant-Man at the top. That's my best guess, but I'm looking forward to playing her. I think her damage is reasonable, and she provides some flexibility with threat reduction as well. It's just the ability to control boss attacks that she lacks with any kind of stun or confuse, and she also doesn't have a way to ready herself. So, thank you for watching.